Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven, 30-year veteran of writing comics, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games, artist and editor as well. And it's a long day. I just got home from being out on errands since like 11 o'clock, so I'm just like not with it at all. Kind of running on a sugar low, so if I'm a little bit out of it, I apologize. But this is our question of the day, and this is going to be the only video of the day. I'm not going to have time to do the reviews later like I thought I would because I didn't know it was going to take forever running errands. But our question of the day is from Tracy in South Carolina, and he asks, why do you think there are so many failed teen superhero books these days? After all, weren't there always successful teenage superhero books before? And the answer is yeah, there was always successful teenage comics of one sort or another. I mean, Spider-Man was a teenager. The X-Men were teenagers. Of course, that book did fail enough to get rebooted as something that wasn't teens. Teen Titans, The Man Called Nova ran pretty well for 2 years. But a lot of it is today how we write comics doesn't necessarily target preteen and teen audiences. We adulterize the books too much, I think. I'll give you a perfectly good example. We got Super Sons, but we also have to have Superboy, where John Kent is now an adult and he's gay, and we got to talk about sexuality. And guess what? Most kids between the ages of 8 and 14 aren't ready to talk about or read about people's sex lives. That's an adult wanting to put what their interests are and foist it on top of the comic that doesn't need to have it. And that's the kind of stuff that's going on in all of our comics, our X-Men comics. It's like, hey, gee, I didn't know Cyclops wants to be screwed by every psychic bimbo there is. Stuff like that just made me, as an adult, leave comics from Marvel and DC. And I'm sure that it has alienated a lot of the younger audiences. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't teenage superhero comics out there. It just happens to be manga. Yeah, they're Japanese comics like One Punch Man and My Hero Academia. But that doesn't mean that American comics can't do it. It's just that they have to stop trying to adulterize the material and start writing for the proper audiences. And this is going to sound a little bit controversial, but that's one of the benefits that the Comics Code Authority actually did give us, because it forced writers to write different type of writing that wasn't the shock and awe, in your face, deal with it type of writing that we do today in comics. And you had to have subtlety in different levels so that the kid would get it at one level, a teenager would get a different meaning of a different level, an adult would get a different meaning, all in the same context and subtext of the same story. We don't have that kind of subtlety in a lot of comics these days, and I think that's why a lot of comics are alienating both younger audiences and the older audiences, because it's very narrow bandwidth, one-dimensional, one-note storytelling. John Norris says, hello, John. I hope you're feeling well. Mm-hmm. I know you've been dealing with that double hernia situation. But that is the basic answer for that. The other basic answer is that we don't market the books towards the mainstream superhero comics from Marvel and DC. They're just not marketed to that audience anymore, and they haven't been for probably a good 15 to 20 years. Probably in the at the beginning of the 90s, maybe you could even argue a little bit further back than that, into the 80s, but certainly in the beginning of the 90s, as we started gearing up and expanding brands and having multiple titles of X books to follow, and multiple Batman books, multiple Spider-Man books, multiple Punisher books, and multiple everything. That also pushed younger audiences out, because even when the books were affordable, which they were affordable back then, at least they were like $1.50, maybe about $1.75 back then. They were still kind of pricing out younger audiences, which is why, again, the writers and artists started going more and more, gearing it more towards a college age, a more adult audience, because adults had money. But you can't do that. You have to have stuff that's appropriate for different levels of audience base. And while Marvel and DC have tried to do content that is age appropriate for younger audiences, I think it's fair to say, and here is the Midnight. There you see him. Come here, kitty. There he is. Everybody wants to see the kitty. Yeah. Okay. Say hello. There he is, everyone. Whenever he makes an appearance, my views go up. So I go. And I don't know what he wants. Oh, it's almost 6. What it is what he wants is his dinner. That's what it is. Yeah, that's what the kitty wants. All right. But anyway, as I was saying, while Marvel and DC have done smaller imprints that geared towards younger readers, like the Marvel Adventures line, the DC animated series line, a lot of the time, even though those books are well written, and sometimes much better written than the standard comics fare from Marvel and DC, I guess you could say there's a resistance to it among the audience base and among retailers, because the art is so-called kidified. The DC animation universe, they're like, oh, that's the kids' art. It's not the cool art. The cool artists are over here on the adult books, read the adult books type thing. And again, that's a problem. I think that if you had the writers who did Batman animated series comics, like Stan Berkowitz and Bruce Timm and those guys writing the regular titles, I think that the structure of the stories would be better, and I think that you wouldn't have to do the artwork kidified. You could still do the more popular adult art, whatever you want to call it, and still have the layers of storytelling that you need to appeal to younger audiences and teenagers and adult audiences. John says, back when he was reading comics regularly, the Marvel Adventures and Giant DC titles were among his favorite books, and they were. He pretty much bypassed the entire adult line, so to speak, and went to those lines. I can remember back in the day and when that was going on. And, I remember reading some of that stuff myself, and I wasn't as big of a fan of it at the time because a lot of like the Marvel Adventures lines, a lot of them went to the younger, less experienced artists and writers, where it probably should have been the more experienced writers working with younger artists, but with editors who understood how to get them to do certain things to make those books stronger than they were. And that doesn't mean those books didn't have their strengths, but the reason that wasn't done was because they were considered a secondary or even a tertiary brand, an imprint that the retailers didn't want to market as standalones for their younger readers. Because if you got into that and they liked that stuff, the probability is they're going to start quitting those multiple X-Men titles, those multiple Spider-Man titles, and just read the Marvel Adventures line, like John did. And that's why that stuff also had a problem with succeeding, was because there was a resistance both within the retail community and the creative community towards producing them, and the fan base saying, well, these aren't the real Marvel comics. The real Marvel comics are over here. That's nothing. Well, no, there's different levels. And if we had changed the attitude and changed the culture in our industry so that people understand that there's a different way of doing things, so that you can have, it's still all Marvel, it's still all the same, but this is the stories that are appropriate for the kids, to the young teens. This is the stuff for the teens to the young adults, and here's the stuff for adults. Not only would you have a better way to structure your stores and market your characters to entire subgroups of fan base, you would have justification for having multiple titles featuring the same characters all the time. Whereas we really don't have it, other than the fact that, okay, the retailer wants to promote as many Batman titles as possible because it's easier to say buy Batman and have 15 Batman titles than it is to promote 15 separate concepts. So there is pretty much the gist of it. Now, can we get that back? Can we do that? I think we can. But again, I think you need to have a different mentality, a different way of marketing the stuff, and teaching both the retailers and the fans how to embrace it. And manga's got that pretty much down already because they've always done different levels of storytelling for different age groups. And that's why manga's kicking American comics' butt right now more than anything else. It doesn't matter what genre it is. But, if we get back to doing that, which we did in the 70s, we did in the 80s, we had all that stuff. Because, even before Marvel Adventures or the Johnny DC line, if you go back and you look in the 70s, they had the Super Friends comic that was for the kids versus the Justice League comic that was more of a teenager comic comparatively. You had Spidey Super Stories, and you had the reprints of the classic Marvel Tales, reprinting the old Spider-Man stories versus the three modern Spider-Man titles at the time in the 80s. Amazing, Peter Parker, Spectacular, and Web of Spider-Man. Of course, that was before McFarlane. So again, just expanded, but you really didn't get what you needed. So we've always had it. It's just a matter of properly marketing it and understanding it instead of trying to put it as a subclass or ghettoize it, because it's not part of the whatever you want to call it, the core group or the so-called main audience, which I think is foolish, because that, why would you do that? Everybody should be our audience as much as possible, so, or at least have the potential to be our audience. And I don't think we do that well enough. So that's my answer for that question. I thank Tracy for asking it. And if you have a question that you'd like to ask me to answer on the show, email me at quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com, subject QTR Q&A. Now, I won't be back this evening to do reviews. Like I said, I was out all day, pretty much. I had to take my van in to get, what's the word for it? Scheduled maintenance. There we go. And it took a lot longer than I thought. And so I had some other errands I had to do. And that took me all day, basically, waiting on the van and then, being able to go do my errands. So a little bit wiped out. But tomorrow I will do 2 reviews. We'll have another question of the day. And Probably talk about what I got in the comic shop as well. So we'll have quite a busy day tomorrow. Okay, folks? In the meantime, hold on a second. My computer's being. Did my computer freeze? Hello? Did my computer freeze? Oh dear. It looks like it might have frozen on me. Can you still see me, John? I'm not getting a response. I don't know if it's John still in the room or not. Okay, he says, okay, good on his end. Okay, all right. All right. Well, if you like this video or you think others might, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content from my channel. As always, I thank you for watching and for your support. And we will see you guys tomorrow. If you want to reach me, again, on Facebook, Lewis.BrightRaven, at Twitter at LewisBrightRave2. You can see some of my artwork at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis BrightRaven, exclusively on YouTube. Again, if you have questions, comments, want to commission some artwork from me, quoththeravenlbr72@gmail.com is the address to reach me at. If I don't get back with you within an hour, or a day or two rather, try LewisBrightRaven@yahoo.com as a backup. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.